Hi, good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. Welcome back to a Photographer Talks. And with me this week, I have a photographer out of the UK. His name is His name is Richard Cannon. And Richard has been in the photography game for a very long time indeed. He was inspired to take up photography from a very young age. After a series of unrelated careers, his first job was a property photographer for a Californian magazine. He spent his time cruising around in the sunshine, photographing properties, and it didn't last long. After a while, he soon tired of that and decided to return to London to improve his skill set, where he enrolled on an HND course in photography. His passion for portrait photography was there ignited, and he worked as a freelance assistant for a number of photographers, but most notably in his memory for second assistant to the late great Terry O'Neill. Freelancing at the Times led him away from hard news coverage to portraiture and features, and won Feature Photographer of the Year for the highly acclaimed British Press Awards for an image of Tony Blair walking into number 10 Downing Street with his reflection in the very newly polished door. He's photographed an eclectic array of public figures, including Prince Charles, who you will see in this conversation, Sir Peter Hall, Norman Cook, Alan Shearer, Dizzy Rascal, and Emily Blunt, and a few others that we will discuss. But he's also photographed the not-so-famous too. He shoots for a number of clients around the UK, including Country Life, BBC Music, and British Airways, and lives in North London. So, without further ado, please allow me to bring Richard Cannon to your screens. There he is.
Hi
Hello,
there.
Richard.
How you doing, Charlie? You all right?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm very well.
Good.
And you?
Good. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good.
You got some pretty impressive spectacles there.
Thanks very much.
Uh,
As the years go by, they get more higher numbers. I started off with like a half, and now on two. Hopefully, it won't go
Only
too
two.
much more than that.
You're a lucky fella. Mine's definitely much thicker than that. That's for sure. You find you can photograph with them all right still?
Well, the thing is, when you're taking, you can change the optics in your viewfinder. So that works fine. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, you can see the pictures fine. It's no problem. But when you go to look at the screen, you have to pop your glasses back on to look at the screen of what you've shot.
Yes.
So you're constantly going up and down the whole time while you're photographing.
Yeah. That's definitely a known issue. I can relate to that too.
Right.
It's something that we've got. We'll have to live with clearly for
Yeah,
the rest
exactly.
of our
Unless they
days.
can make something that goes over the screen that you could, equally change the optics on that too.
Yes, that will probably come out. I would imagine very very soon. I'm sure Canon or Nikon are thinking about it, or
Yeah.
Sony. So how's life been for you in the last sort of few weeks, months? What seems like years now. Have you been keeping yourself busy with personal projects?
Yeah, I've been doing a few personal projects, a few sort of self portraits. I've been commissioned for a little bit of work through the Good Health for the Daily Mail, so that's been keeping me somewhat busy, like one job a week, sometimes two jobs a week, which is quite nice. So I've been having to be able to get out there and take some photos, which is good commercially. But a lot of the sort of stuff for Country Life, British Airways, 442, BBC Music, stuff like that, the commissions are completely stopped. They're not doing anything for them, so it's completely stopped. But they've told me that, come June, middle of June, early July, they should start commissioning again.
Okay.
So we keep our fingers crossed in hope that everything goes back to normal.
Yeah. Well, we certainly do. I was speaking to a photographer only a couple of days ago who said that he's received a few pieces of information, a few shoots that are starting to come up, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of movement around the place. So let's hope that people start to come out and do things again that are worth documenting.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
there's plenty of wonderful things to be photographed. Whether people are talking about them or not is another matter, obviously. So let's kick off with some of these great shots that you've got here. The first one I wanted to put on the screen is of a DJ who I'm a massive fan of. Back when you shot this image, I was one of those people that wanted to go down to the beach and dance on it. I was living in London at the time. I never managed to get there, sadly. So I watched it. On the screen and enjoyed it from afar. But this picture that you shot of Mr. Norman Cook, or otherwise known as Fatboy Slim, it evokes entirely the moment in time. But I think the funny thing about this that you mentioned to me is that actually there's an amusing story behind this, which I'd love for you to relay. Now I can pop it up on the screen there. There he is, resident Fatboy Slim, rocking it out.
Yeah. So when I got down there, the interview was already in mid-flow, and so I arrived, and they shook hands with Norman, and he first of all he says, "I don't want to be photographed on the beach. I've been photographed enough times on the beach. I really don't want to be photographed on the beach again. So try and if you can find somewhere else." I say, "Okay, that's fine. Carry on with your interview. I'll go out there and have a look at some other places where we could do the portraits, and I'll come back, and then we can go out and do the pictures." So I went out around sort of Brighton and had a look around. I was thinking of doing something against the cliffs, stuff like that, on the beach, but sort of just using the whites of the cliffs. And I've found a few locations and stuff like that. And I came back all thinking, well, I try and get like 3 locations whenever I'm doing something, and not necessarily if it's in different places, but 3 sort of setups wherever I go to shoot. Yeah. And so I sort of managed to sort out 3 places, and I came back, and the interview was still going on, and it was still in mid-flow, and I was sort of hanging on. And then finally I said, right, okay, we'll have to get in the car to go to these 3 locations. He goes, "Oh, I don't fancy going anywhere." I go, I said, where can we go? He goes, I said, I did notice on my way out there was an aggregate place round the corner from where he lived. He goes, "Oh, I know the guy there. Let's go down there. Let's do the pictures there." So I said, okay. So we went down this place, and everybody thinks that the image is taken on the beach at Brighton Beach, but it's not. It's taken in an aggregate factory that's just round the corner, and they were just closing up. So I managed to get down there, and in those days I would only be using sort of a little flash that fits on top of the camera. So I had the record company guy sort of holding that, and I positioned him in front of the sun. Luckily, the sun was right behind him. Yeah. And I got this beautiful, the sky just all of a sudden came just so good for me. I mean, I'm very lucky. Whenever I go and photograph, the skies always look so great. And shot him in front, and because I'm lower down on this aggregate that goes sort of up onto it's almost like a hill of stone, and so I shot him against that, and he loved them. I mean, afterwards he wanted some copies. I sold him some copies as well as ending up in the magazine.
I know that. That's very, very clever, because obviously you would think it's on the beach. It was at the era of the beach, so you did quite a good job. You found him, and well, clearly he sounded like he was a bit of a tricky subject at that point. It looks like he kind of had enough of the whole interview.
It wasn't too tricky. He was just like, he just knew what he'd obviously been photographed thousands and thousands of times.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he was sick of just doing the beach shot. So it ended up being a kind of beach shot anyway. Which kind of but he liked it, and it worked out well. And I was just lucky that it was one of those summer days that just worked out perfectly.
Yeah, true. I mean, you got the right spot for sure. I think what I quite like about it actually is the way that it draws you in. So in a way, it almost feels like it's a bit of a trick shot that you have done on the beach. So there's this kind of an irony, because obviously Brighton Beach is full of stones.
Yeah.
In the same way that's all, the aggregate there. And it looks almost like you kind of sat him on the beach and laid down in some kind of weird way and played with the perspective of your lenses to get him like that. So, despite him not actually wanting to be on the beach, you've done a pretty good job of kind of
Well,
illustrating him in such a
I
place.
always say it takes two people to make a great portrait. I mean, he just sort of stood. I didn't give him any direction of how he should sit. He just sat there and he looked so relaxed sitting there, looking towards camera. It always takes, whenever you're doing portraits of famous or infamous people, you need to work together to
Of
create the
course,
portrait.
yeah.
If one person's doesn't want to be photographed, it's very difficult to come up with something really strong after that.
How long did you have with him then in total? Would you say?
Yeah, most of the time with all the stuff I shoot, I have very little time. You have to think quite quickly. I think that's why I liked Terry O'Neill's work when I was sort of starting out, because he was one of these people that had to go there. He was doing film location shoots and stuff like that, where you're just sitting there being bored for like hours on end, and all of a sudden you've got to do it in 15 minutes and get out of there. So, and that's why it's really important to sort of get to places early, have a good look around, so you're not kind of stuck. Or as long as you have, well, for me, as long as I have keep going on about it, but 3 setups, it works.
Yeah, of course, because you can bounce them between it, and you can talk talk with them and ingratiate yourself to them whilst you're moving between those locations, as well as obviously use it to continue your scope. And if you suddenly hit the mark in mid location, kind of going from A to B, then you have a funny moment. Then you can always improvise and maybe catch that shot that you least expected to have. But I'm well aware that sometimes you get very very little time with people to shoot them. I've myself have had a couple of situations. I remember I had to shoot David Cameron for something a good number of years ago, and it was very much, I had the setup in the room. He walked in one door, stood in front of it. I clicked the trigger. He walked out the door. It was like,
Yeah, I've had some of those.
I think I probably had maximum of a minute.
Yeah.
So hence why I'm asking, because you never really know, and sometimes there's a forced smile or it's natural, and so it's good. It's good to hear your sort of process.
But in those circumstances, then I had the luxury of 15 minutes.
Wow.
Because also having 3 setups is a way of, if one area you go to, you have this idea of the photo, but then he gets down there or she gets down there and it's not working. You've got the other 2 as backup.
Of course, yeah.
So you've always got like one other, you can quickly move on. Whereas if you've only got one setup that you think of and it's not working, you're kind of stuck and you're pushing that one setup and to the death where it's not working at all. Whereas at least you have other areas you think, right, this is not working, let's move on to the next piece.
Precisely. Got to keep yourself mobile. So good that you're working with small flashes as well.
In those days I was just using one flash, that was it, just one and it was on this long sort of umbilical cord that was connected to my camera, because we couldn't have any kind of radio slaves in those times. So it had to be quite close to the camera where it was. So I mean, it worked luckily, but now I use sort of bow and lighting, so I've got 3 or 4 heads, sometimes 5 or 6 heads that I use, and so I make sure I set up before the subject comes and then go for it.
Exactly, yeah. They're slightly different type of shoot, really. Sort of less kind of running around and being and instead being far more prepared. So the next shot then that I'd love to put up is great. I mean, I think it's great for no other reason, but then we've got royalty on the show. What can I say? No, it's great. I don't think I've spoken to anyone who's ever photographed a royal.
Right.
So and I've met and worked with a fair number of photographers. So this is a great shot. So here we go. Obviously, perfect name. He shares mine. So Prince Charles, Prince Charles of all people. What is he doing here? Yeah. This is funny. So tell me what happened here. You said that you were in Stoke-on-Trent at the time. When was this?
It was a couple of years ago, three years ago, something like that.
Okay.
I was commissioned by the British Airways. He was going to places to rejuvenate areas that were once famous for what they do, and Stoke-on-Trent's famous for pottery. So he was out visiting factory. So they said I could have 2 minutes with him on a 1-to-1. Yeah, 2 minutes, the luxury of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I got there early. I set up in this kind of long room that had all molds. It's the largest collection of molds in the country, I think in Europe. And so it's just long hallways, and just all down each aisle is all molds of different potteries and all kinds of different pieces that they've done. And in one section, they had a section of the kind of royal mugs and jugs and stuff like that. So I thought that would be appropriate. Let's get him a photograph him amongst that. So I managed to get out. You have to talk to the press secretary. You have to explain what your ideas are, and you have to say, this is the idea. This is okay. He agrees the idea. And so you have to stick to the plan that they want. So just to keep it. So they've got a kind of a lid on what's going to happen in the shoots. And so so he came along, and the entourage stayed where they were. He was visiting a factory. He came upstairs. There was no other photographers, just me and him. Had to call him sir and asked him to come over to the area that I wanted to photograph him. And I was, I had to get a cover shot for the magazine, but also inside shots as well, all in that 2.5 minutes. So I was under a lot of pressure. So there was loads of jugs there, and there was this one. I started photographing, and it was working okay. And then I asked him, would he mind holding one of the jugs? And it was the Queen on horseback, but in relief, which means it's almost 3D out of the jug. The Queen is on horseback, and I thought that'd be quite nice for him to hold. And I asked him, sir, would you mind holding this for? Oh no, it's fine. He'll do that. And he held the jug, but he kind of held it in a way where he was had it sort of low down, and he wasn't really engaging with it in any way at all. And I said, okay, well let's move on, because I was like, all in my mind, it was just ticking away. Time was ticking and I was going to waste my time just talking to him. And then he starts putting this jug back, but he starts taking like what seemed like an age, where exactly he got this jug from. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is I'm going to waste all my time putting this jug away. So I said, oh, let me take it from you. When I took it from him, I took the Queen and I lifted it, and I didn't realize how brittle it was. And I popped the Queen's head off from the jug. So I'm standing there with the Queen's head in my hands, and he's standing with a decapitated Queen, a jug in his. And the entourage was all back, and I thought, oh no, what have I done?
Was there laughter, or was there a gasp?
It was kind of where he kind of looked at me, and we kind of like two school kids, like, oh, you've got to tell someone about this. You can't just let these things go. And I go, don't worry, sir. I will sort it all out, when we finish. If we could just do a few more shots, I really, really appreciate it. And so we did a few more shots, and then he went off. And as I came back, the press secretary was like, we didn't agree that shot with him holding something. I go, yeah, I know. It just got me the moment. I just thought it would be a good idea. He goes, you've got to sort that out. You've got to. So I thought it was like some really expensive jug that was like hundreds of years old. And I was thinking, does my indemnity insurance cover this kind of thing?
Yeah.
And so I went downstairs, and there was this guy downstairs, and I go, look what I did. I've just broken this thing. He goes, oh, I made that up last week for the visit, so don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, thank God for that. So yeah, it was one of those things, and it ended up that picture of him ended up on the front page of the magazine. And then as I left there, I followed him into the factory where all the other photographers were, and did a few other shots, and got the inside shot as well. So it all worked out in the end.
It's pretty difficult, and it's a good insight there to sort of understand how they work. Is he the only royal that you photographed?
Sorry, yes, he is. I've photographed other royals, but from afar.
Okay, yeah, right.
Never a one-to-one exclusive shots before.
And how did the sort of the agreement on the shots beforehand? How did that relate, or was that? Have you had to go through that before with any of your other shoots, or have you always been more sort of?
I once had to photograph Dolly Parton. And the guy there he was ridiculous. He was asking me where I was going to stand, what position I was going to be in, where she was going to be sitting, blah, 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 blah. And it was just overwhelming. I just thought, this is ridiculous, trying to control way, way too much. That was the only other time. Otherwise, No, it's pretty okay.
Quite
There's
fluid.
never a kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, the funny thing was at the end of it, I was quite embarrassed. I wrote a letter to Clarence House saying, apologising for putting the prince in an awkward situation. I got a lovely letter back, which is on my wall.
Nice. That's good. Well
Yeah,
done for
that's
you.
not.
But, I think that says a lot. You wanted to apologise for your essentially a misdemeanor, at least in their eyes, and you've
Years ago, I could have been decapitated myself for something like
well
that.
quite you stepped over the line. You stepped over the line. That's good. I mean, that must have been a great experience. To have that opportunity. I can only but imagine the rate of pace that your heart was going at
Oh
those in
yeah,
those
no, it
2 minutes.
was. The 2 minutes obviously flew by, but it was quite nerve wracking. I got there about an hour before his visit, and just did test after test after test just to make sure everything was in place.
I think regardless of how many people you photographed in life, whether they're sort of huge business leaders or world leaders or whatever, if you're down to that 2 minutes to photograph somebody, it's always going to be a little bit of a kind of a racing heart, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and it's always going to be things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
You have 2 minutes. You're never going to get. Oh, you'll come back from it. There's, how many times I've left a shoot, got back in my car, started driving back home, and thinking, oh, why didn't I do this, or why didn't I do that?
I can.
Well, why can I think of these things at the spot?
Of course, I don't think you're the only person. I think we all suffer from that. There's plenty of photographers I know that when we've done shoots together, you finish the shoot, the subject walks away, and then no, that would have been a great spot. Why didn't we go there? Anyway.
Although it has happened where I've put my stuff in and I've packed it all away, and then I've hang on a second, do you mind? And
yes,
then I've taken it all out again.
Always have a camera prepped and ready just for that last.
Well, the thing
moment.
is, also the thing is, sometimes you can't recreate things. I mean, if you can take a shoot and you can go back and do the exact same thing with the same person, and it won't feel the same at all.
No,
it's one of those things that you're in that moment with that person who's in that mood, and you're in that mood, and that the day of whatever you've had beforehand and whatever you.
Of course, yeah, and
you
they're
can't
willing.
replicate that. It's just that is the moment, and you photograph for that moment, and not to reproduce it again.
Yeah, I completely agree, and they're willing to do things. You have them for that moment. You've got that spark, and it's sometimes just so impossibly difficult to try and recreate that.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a few times where I've had to go back and shoot something. It's the whole energy is gone.
Yeah, I can completely appreciate that. So, like the next shot that I want to put up probably actually illustrates that perfectly. It's a commission you had for BBC Music, and you said to me when we were talking that had this cage not been around, then you may have found this shoot altogether quite challenging. So that shows where you obviously got a spark. Now, I'm kind of intrigued as to where this was. I can't tell what the context was or where this was, but I've put it up on the screen.
I had to go to Salford to the media centre up there. It's quite nice. So they do all the BBC filming up there and stuff like that, and they have a studio there where the London Philharmonic play or rehearse.
Yes.
So he was there doing rehearsal with them. So I get there early and had a look around, and there was the only area that was available to me was either photographing him while he was rehearsing, which is really difficult because you have to be very quiet. You have to walk around. You don't get the angles that you want, and also the magazine wants a picture where the subject's looking into camera and it's not so much of things going on. So I looked around this area, and there was kind of like a foyer which almost looked like a airport foyer or airport concourse, whatever. And it just looked really boring. And then I saw this green wall, but I couldn't really get too far back. But I thought, well, we've got the green wall. Maybe I could just do some portraits of him against the green wall and maybe do something over by the seating area. But, that's another option. And so that was it. And so I told his manager, this is what I was going to do. And he goes, that's fine, whatever. And then And then I sort of bored and looking around, so I started to walk around. So I'm like, you never know, I might find a space in the corner somewhere. So I started walking around and into this foyer, into the back rooms and stuff like that, just seeing what I could see. And there was this cage, just this one of these transport cages there, and I thought, oh, let's get this cage, let's do it. So I pulled the cage, got my assistant, who was my son at the time, was helping me, and I got him, and I said, oh, well, if you stand in this cage, and then I could get the light just shining up and get the shadow of the cage going off in the background. And so I had to then go to the manager. I've just thought of a new idea. This is the idea. And I told him, and I showed him a couple of samples of the photos that I photographed with the assistant, my son. And he goes, okay. I said, would he be up for something like that? He goes, well, if he feels that it's something that has to do with what he does or the feeling of his music, then he'll go for it. And luckily he did. And in the end, he came along. And I was just getting him standing in this thing. And he said, do you want me to climb out? And he took off his shoes because he couldn't get the right feel. And he took off his shoes. He started climbing out. And then I tried to get him to, I said, could you perch? Could you just perch up there? So he did that perching. And that was, I just loved that shot because it's almost like he's a gymnast sort of hanging on there. And I got some shots of him kind of looking up and trying to go away and all these kind of things. But and then it just worked, and that green color behind worked, and the shadows falling in the background just worked, and it all just came together. And when I came back, I was like, it was one of those things where it just, always my favorite shot is not the shot of the famous person. It's the shot where I know where I've walked into that space and it's been really boring and there's been nothing around, and I've created something special. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, the power of light is a big thing, and obviously you've used it to magnificent effect there to cast kind of that the spooky shadow, if you will. The light is bouncing from the right hand side of the picture, and he's sort of looking off into the distance and the future.
Yeah,
it's
I love
really
that
nice.
photo.
I mean, it's a very simple execution, especially when you explain kind of the predicament you were in. Because I think that's always the beauty, really, of photography, especially when you're kind of doing something that's on the fly, is the ability to come up with ideas and actually make them really successful and strong. Because there's so many times when you go off on shoots that it's impossibly difficult. You look around and you kind of arrive and you're in a bit of a state of despair. You think, oh no, where on earth can I make then make the magic happen? And that's a really great example. It's stark contrast to the shot we're going to discuss afterwards or next. But I think you're right. The green wall for some reason kind of adds to it. It's sort of
if it was a white wall, it wouldn't have the same effect. I don't think it's that green color.
Yeah.
But also, it's when people a lot of you see a photograph in a magazine, you turn the page and you see the magazine, and you like it or whatever, and you think they've gone there. That's all been arranged, and they've gone and taken the photo. They very rarely realise what's actually involved in a shoot and how much you have to think on your feet on a shoot.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I thrive, is being able to think on my feet. And also having my favourite artist is Salvador Dali, so there's always a little bit of surrealism in me.
Right.
Maybe not in the way I manipulate my pictures or make them like really weird, but it's always sort of an underlying sort of message in my work, is this kind of Salvador Dali vibe.
So him with Terry O'Neill, would you say your major
Yeah, him and Man Ray. I like Man Ray. He photographed a lot of the surrealist artists at the time.
Yeah.
Litchfield, and Jacques-Henri Latrigue. He's another one that's amazing photographer.
I was looking through a lot of your black and white images that you had hauled from your attic recently.
Yeah.
Or rather, I was looking recently. I'm not sure when you hauled them from your attic, but you could see a few kind of elements of like Man Ray in some of those, for sure.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind, because I do try it. It's one of those things. It's a subconscious thing. It's not something I go out there and go, how would Dali do this, or how could I do something a bit surreal in this thing? It just manifests itself in the shoot.
Yeah. Well, it's evident, definitely. I mean, that last one's Definitely got a bit of kind of wackiness in it, but not quite as much, I would say, as the next one. Now I sort of feel. I feel for the guy in this shot. This was, you say, for a commission for Country Life, or part of a larger commission. Because looking on your website, there's quite a number of portraits across sort of the artistic endeavour, shall we say, sort of material, beds, paint, etc. And this was for Mylands Paint Company. Now, I'm going to chuck this up. You've obviously got a bit of a thing for green, because there's notably a green background here.
Yeah.
But this guy, man, I mean, was this genuinely paint, or was this classic photographic?
I wish I could show you the other picture of what the floor looked like and the room looked like after we'd finished. So this is a factory. This is at their factory, and the idea was it was made in Britain. So the idea was finding companies that have their production in England, and obviously they do. They have their factories in England and make all the paints, and they use the paints a lot, go into sort of film sets and stuff like that, and in royal household palaces and stuff. So they're really upmarket places. And then I've got to make a quirky image. So each one of these made in Britain, the idea was, the underlying thing was that it had to be quite quirky.
Yeah.
So you have to phone them up and you have to speak to them and say, you know, what's available, what's going on there, because I'm not there. I can't go to these places, have a look around and come back and think of ideas and then go back again. A lot of the places are like all around England. So this one happened to be in London, but still, I haven't got they don't pay you commissioning to go down there and have a look at the place. So,
yeah.
So the idea that was just in my head was, paint. What can we make it quirky? Would he be happy having paint thrown at him? And so I said to him, I'd like to do paint, but also I'd like to have a white suit. Could you wear something white? I don't want it to be colour, because the whole thing is the colour of the paint. So he goes, let me have a think about it. And then he comes back to me, goes, okay, I'll do it. And he's the son. He's like Myland. He's the director of the company, the owner of the company. So there's this 70s building right next to his factory, which is part of the factory, but they just do. So you can see that grid at the backdrop. They do the sets for their brochures and stuff.
Right.
And so they put a couple of bits of furniture in there with a lamp, and then that green as the background and stuff like that. And so he came along and he had like 2 white suits. Which one do you want me to wear? And I was like, this is going to be fun. And so I didn't have any flash that time. I thought because it was happening so quickly, I just got some HDMI lights, so I could just have them constantly on. They weren't that powerful, but they were powerful enough. So I didn't have to worry too much. I had 2 of these massive. They're like film lights. They're like huge, great big barn doors.
Big Arri type things.
Yeah. So I put 2 of those up, so I could just keep along. And then I had 4. He brought 4 of his employees down. When are you ever going to get a chance to throw paint at your boss?
Yeah, exactly.
So I had them. Each one had a colour. So one blue, green, white, or a cream, and a red. And I said, on 3, I want you to throw the paint. So there was no paint done. They all got these full buckets of paint. So I said, ready, 1, 2. And then I was just about to say 3, and they threw the paint over him. And so I missed the shot.
Oh, no.
And so we had to really work out like exactly right. On 3, yeah, on 3, not before 3. We had to get it right. And then we just kept on throwing paint over him. And just, this was the only shot where I got this lovely coverage of colour. So you can see the blue goes right across him. You've got the cream that kind of falls and goes across him. The green then comes down and splashes off, and the red just sort of hits his knee. And that was the frame. I had 1 frame like that. The others, they had slightly paint on one side and not on the other. It was kind of like it was a bit sort of mix and match, and it wasn't really working too well. But that 1 frame I got of him with all the paint just flying across just perfectly.
It is a beautiful shot, actually. The way the paint sort of looks so silken and smooth.
Yeah. That picture I have on my wall in my home. I love that photo.
Yeah, I can imagine it. It's sort of the red on his head. is sort of mildly scary, isn't it? In a way,
Yeah. But if you go to my website, canonpictures.com, I've got a picture of him after
yes.
him sitting in a chair. So you can see the kind of mess that was left after we finished.
Did he enjoy it? Did he
Yeah,
regret
yeah, he
doing
loved
it?
it. He loved it.
'Cause
Yeah, I also wanted him to have this deadpan face. I don't want him smiling like, "Oh, this is fun happening to
oh
me."
yeah, yeah.
I wanted to have this kind of face, just looking at it like, "There's no paint on me. I'm just looking to camera." And then there's this whole thing going on below his eyes.
It's great. I love the floor actually.
Yeah, the floor.
Bottom.
When you go to the website and see the other shot, this sort of kaleidoscope of color on the floor
Yeah.
looked great. I did some shots, like loads of shots afterwards as well. But this one kind of tells the tale.
It's great. It's fantastic, and interesting to know that you did it with constant light as well. That's I suppose there obviously you can rattle off as many shots as you want without having to worry about the recharge of the flashes.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I could put it on a high rate, so I could shoot like 3 or 4 images in that span of time.
Yeah,
But still, with all that, I got one frame.
it's minimal because obviously that's flying super fast, and to get that one shot that's really stunning is clearly very difficult. I remember I did a massive shoot with similar, but with powder paint.
Right. Okay.
A number of years ago. It was commissioned a German photographer, and we had a dancer who was dancing and then having paint thrown all over her. So
That
similar,
sounds so fun.
the timing and the mess
Yeah.
and the successful shot ratio to the amount taken. I
Yeah.
can feel that. I can feel the kind of the pain effectively that you went through. But the funny thing is that the more of those shots you take, effectively, I think the better it got. Because obviously, if you got it in the first take when they were meant to throw on 3 and throw through on 2, then you wouldn't have that kaleidoscopic floor, which
Yeah. No.
itself
Exactly.
massively.
Yeah. No. Very true. There was a photographer, a friend of mine, that used to do still lifes, and sometimes they'd have like the art director there. They'd have the guy from the company he was photographing from, and he'd have like 10 people around him, all for this one product shot that he'd be shooting. And there were some times where he would do it, and he would know he got the shot the first frame, and the rest of the day he was just doing it to please everybody else.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny.
Well, that's the nature of the show, shall we say?
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of that for sure in this industry, and nothing wrong with it. Obviously, lots of people like going to the shoots. That's why
Yeah.
there's
No.
loads of people
Absolutely.
there. It's
Yeah.
different from the day job, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that shot obviously shows it for sure. But the last shot that we're going to discuss of Slava the clown,
Right.
that's definitely different to the day job. Now, this guy, I'm sure he possibly hated you after this shot because of the state that you left him in.
uh,
What on earth was the context behind this? Because we haven't
the
discussed this
context
all in
was
depth.
that he lives. You have to get the train. The funny thing is about it, he's Slava the clown, but you have to get a train that goes to Disneyland, and the stop before Disneyland is near where his house is. So it stops. There's one more. So I don't know if it still does it, but it does a stop just before Disneyland, then goes on to Disneyland. And so his house and his studio, and he has a school there as well, is unbelievable. Each room he's done in a different style. So one room is just black and white. It's just all of it's just black and white.
Wow.
One room has got a tree growing right the way through it, and then there's another room where there's huge things. So when you stay in the room, when he has friends staying, they all feel really tiny because there's like a massive phone and the bed's really big and everything's huge in this room. And each room is like different. It was such a weird place, and I was photographing in these places, but they all I did some nice shots of him, but it just wasn't working. But when he got there, when I was on the train over there, I just thought, what can we do to do something different? And I was trying to think of something to do rather than the normal. And when I arrived, when he doesn't perform, he just lets his beard grow. So I took a look at him and I just thought, hang on a second, let's see. I didn't realize he'd have a beard on. I said to him, and he doesn't speak very good English. And his wife was, I think his wife's Russian,
Okay.
and she spoke pretty good English. And I said, I've got a question for him. This is before we even started on walking around the place. I said, would he be interested in shaving half his beard? So she goes, I don't know. She spoke to him, and he kind of smiled and didn't say anything. And then we went on to the shoot, and I thought, well, we didn't get a no, so that's a good positive thing. So we walked around, did the thing, and then literally, as always, my train was going to be going in about half an hour, and I needed to finish, and I didn't have my shoot. I didn't get that shot. We found this area which is quite dark, and I said, and I reiterated, do you think we can get? Do you think? And he goes, yeah, okay, we'll do it. And he went upstairs and shaved off half his beard and did his makeup half the thing. But then he was wandering around, and I was worried as well. The time was going by because I had to catch my train. He was wandering around because they're very particular about their noses, which I never knew. And he was trying to find his nose. He couldn't find the nose that he uses. And he was like, saw these other noses and had to find this right nose that he has. Because he's not the traditional sense of a clown. He does a lot of Cirque du Soleil stuff.
Yes.
So it's a very sort of untraditional clown role. And so he found this sort of little red thing, and we just did the shot. And then literally, as I just did the couple of frames, I must have done about 10 frames, and then just quickly threw all my stuff in the bag and just grabbed the train back home.
It's a killer shot. I mean, I love the way that he's staring so blankly,
Yeah,
into the camera, into you, uh, and it's sort of the fried head that he has on the left hand side. Any reason why he decided to be topless?
well, he was wearing his shirt, and I said to him, uh, doesn't really work with the shirt. I said, could you take your shirt off? And then it stopped. He was like, I'm not sure about
Not
this.
sure
You
about
know,
that.
don't want to be taking my shirt off now. He was like, wasn't happy. And I said, well, look, I've got, my camera. I can show you what it looks like. If you're really upset and you don't think it's any good, then I'll delete it and we won't have the pictures.
Yeah.
So he goes, okay, well, let's do it like that. So, we wouldn't have been able to do that with sort of Polaroid stuff. We have to wait, put it under your arm,
Of course.
wait for that Polaroid
the
to
train.
come up, then show him the thing. So the digital was a plus for that shoot, and he looked at it. He goes, "Yeah, I can see that this is good with the shirt off." So, and I thought it was more powerful with the shirt off too.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is more powerful. I'm just more questioning as to why. Maybe he got too much hair over his other shirt when he was shaving his beard off.
No.
Did you send him a copy of the?
Yeah, I sent him a copy and stuff like that. Yeah, he was really happy with it all.
And is that something that you do generally? That you try to send a?
I try and sell them more than give them away. If I'm shooting. So like the ones for Fatboy Slim, I sold him those photos that he could use. So when I can, I try and sell them. But if they're not not famous people and they just want some pictures, I just give them the pictures.
Yeah.
Because there's no longevity in photos of people that are just being photographed for one particular article or something like that. So I'll just say to them, give me your email addresses. And the one thing I do say is that it has to appear in the magazine first. So I won't release anything unless it's been in the magazine first. Because it could unravel a whole load of cobwebs that they could say, oh, I got the picture, I don't like that picture, I don't want that being used. And then I've shot myself in the foot.
No, of course, yeah.
So I always say you can have the picture, but once it's appeared in the magazine. Because a lot of people don't realise when they have their photos taken, it's their normal way of seeing themselves is through a mirror. So they're always seeing themselves the other way around. So when you see yourself in a picture, it's always never exactly how you think you should look.
No.
Because it's a different perspective. So people see their pictures, and a lot of people don't like them because they don't. Oh, well, that's not me. Well, no, it's not, because you're used to seeing yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I mean, in your experience, then you photographed obviously we've seen Prince Charles and Fatboy Slim, but looking through your site and your portfolio, you photographed a good number of kind of British well-known British people, so Jimmy Carr, Dawn French, Tom Akins, the chef, David Furnish. He's super high profile. Christian Horner, I noticed from Red Bull Racing, and the
Yeah,
late great Ronnie Corbett.
yeah,
Have
great.
have any of those ever been super challenging, to photograph, or is there a shoot that you remember being immensely difficult?
They all have their challenges, and in each their way. There is to do a photograph. It's always a slight, there's always some kind of challenge because you're working with a location that you have no prior knowledge of. So
But
there's always that kind of challenge. But
have you ever had any of them turn around and say no? That photograph, no.
yeah, I once was photographing David Williams, who was crossing the channel, doing that swim across the
Oh
channel.
yeah, yeah, I remember
So I
that.
was going to photograph, and he was in a hotel room. So I went to a friend of mine and borrowed his goggles and mask, and I thought I'd get him in the bath
Oh yeah,
with his goggles and mask. Just even if it was on the side, his foot just hanging over the bath, with his goggles on. The thing would be a great shot for that he's going to do. I thought that I would just, this is the shot. He's going to
classic
go for this
editorial.
shot.
Yeah.
And when I got there, he's like, "No, I'm not doing any of that. I'm not. Could you stand in the bath? No." He goes, "I'll sit on the bed. That's it. I'll do that." I was
Okay.
like, "Well, this is about you." No, not interested. But then again, I went to photograph him a second time, and he was an absolute pleasure to photograph. So sometimes, like I said, to take a portrait takes two, and it all depends on that moment, that mood
Of course.
that you're in,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, yeah, they're all slightly challenging. Everyone is slightly challenging. That's photography. You work through those challenges to create a great image. And
Yeah.
like when you stuff the Red Bull stuff, the challenge is that the action's happening in front of you, and you've got to find a place, and a way to photograph it
Of course. Yeah.
that's interesting,
Yeah.
and that's really engaging.
So out of all of them, all the shots that you've done over time, is there anyone in particular that really stands out as kind of your most memorable? I mean, you say you've got the Mylands paint one printed and on your wall. Is there one that's your sort of real? This is my shot.
Well, I like the one with the. I don't try and go back to like loads of stuff, old stuff. I think you're only as good as your next job, and so I try to let those things go. I like them, and I obviously use them on my website, but I try to look forward. And so, the recent shot was the conductor. That for me is my favourite shot because like I said before, it's something I didn't think of beforehand, and just thought on my feet, and the location was really pants, and I created something really special. So
Yeah. Yeah.
those are the ones that really stand out as my favorite shots. Not, it wouldn't be like some people say, "Oh, this famous person or that famous person," but it's not. It's not about. Usually, with famous people, you get very little time, and a lot of times you're doing these things called press junkets.
Yeah.
So what happens is they'll be in a hotel room, and they'll do 20 interviews that day or 10 interviews that day, and they'll have 10 photographers coming in after each interview, and they'll be photographed over and over and over again. So you don't get, and you want to create, the photographer comes in all creative, and this guy's like, "This is my 10th shot today."
I'm not interested in this
Yeah.
latest. Yeah,
So
that's.
the ones that are most challenging are the ones where they don't really want to be. I've once photographed Alan Sugar
Oh yeah.
before. I think it was just when he was starting out on that show he was
The
doing. What's it
Apprentice.
called? Apprentice. And he didn't want to be photographed at all. Didn't want to do this. Didn't want to do anything. And ended up just putting him up against a white wall, and then just shooting him from below and getting him to look quite mean down to the camera, and then that worked.
Yeah.
But all my other ideas and stuff like that, he was not interested, and they're literally a few frames. So if the subject's not interested, those are extra challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. So over time, you talked about using Bowens. What is for your lighting? What is your favorite kind of camera tool? What's the one that you use? Are you a Canon man or a Fuji man
I
or a
use
Leica?
Canon. I always, my whole thing is, I once tried to go to Canon to see if I can get some kind of sponsorship with equipment. I thought it'd be a perfect fit, but it's never materialized. So I always thought, you know what, one day I'm going to go to Nikon, and then they could have a whole advertising campaign. Canon uses Nikon. So I'm waiting to do that deal.
I think you're not the only one that's been there or had that idea. To be perfectly honest, there's yeah, a lot of that goes on in the industry, for sure. But have you ever used any other cameras or done any kind of weird shoots where you've maybe used we touched on Polaroids or using large format or anything of that sort?
No, I'm one of the things. There was a in one of the photo magazines. There was this long list of ideas from photographers what you should do, and one of the things was always personal projects, which is a really important thing to do.
Yeah.
But then there's like, use a different camera and use a different lens that you're not used to, and I was looking at that and thinking, yes, I want to do that, and I've never really done it. I try to approach everything I do without a kind of set standards. I don't want to go up there and think, right, this is how I'm going to do it because this is how I did it for the other person. I try and keep like completely fresh, and I really don't really think about the job too much until I walk into that room.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to be what you imagine it to be, even though they describe it to you. It's never going to be the same. And B, it just keeps you fresh for the moment rather than going there and being disappointed. So you'll be there and you'll think, oh God, this is not what I thought it was going to be like. So I try and keep myself fresh, and I try and not keep the same kind of lighting set up for each one because I know that's the lighting I've done. I try and keep it, which is actually detrimental to my work, because basically when you go and try and get work as a photographer, they all want to put you in a pigeonhole. And because my work is kind of a bit fluid in the way of portraiture, the only kind of thing is this quirkiness, but that's the way I work, and my work will be judged, many years from now, I should imagine, rather than the moment when you're in it.
Yes.
There'll be people going, hopefully there'll be people going, God, I worked with Richard Cannon. Yeah, I remember. I can't believe I worked with him.
Maybe someday, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's the dream. I go to sleep having that. That.
Well, Prince Charles says it every night, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know. He's so pleased. I know.
Exactly. He had that experience. So you touched on personal.
That's my letter apologising framed on his wall.
Oh, there you go. You see, yeah. There's a connection there between you in a big way. So you mentioned personal projects. Have you been up to anything recently, specifically that you'd like to?
I did a personal project with my neighbours during lockdown. Just thought I would do something. So I've been working the same way when I've been doing stuff for Daily Mail and Good Health. I have to shoot not inside their homes. I have to set up a backdrop and shoot them. So I thought, let's use this in my personal project, because not only is it a personal project about the people, but it's also the way I'm working in this lockdown. And so I've tried to combine the two. And so I've set up this stand, and I literally set it up outside my house, and this with a backdrop, and then asked my neighbours to bring stuff that reminded them of lockdown. Luckily enough, I got the last week of lockdown before some of the restrictions were lifted, so it was like a real end. And what I didn't realise about the shoot, which it was great, it was a really good shoot, and everything, got some really good stuff. I didn't realise how the people, how they would take it as a moment of like really joyous moment for being able to go out and do something rather than going to the shops and coming back again and going and having their photograph taken. It's something special. Not everyone has a great portrait taken of themselves all the time.
Indeed.
And so I didn't even count on that. I was so focused on what I was doing, I didn't realize how much it meant to the people that were being photographed, and that really touched me.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, actually. I mean, it's very easy to take it for granted. We have this kit, we have the ability to shoot nice portraits of friends and family because we've got all this stuff, but not everybody does have that. So it's very nice to be able to bring that to the community. And I think that's one thing that's come out of all this for sure is more community-based sort of projects and doing favours for those around you. So that's a very cool thing. I'm sure they're very happy with the result.
Yeah. And I've got a couple more ideas that I'm going to do. So we're waiting on those. I'm going to be there's a couple of projects I was just about to begin before lockdown. So I'm going to try and get those back up and going again. And then there's another lockdown project that I'm going to work on, which we'll see what happens with that.
Bit of a theme developing here. Bit of a theme.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a question's come in from someone by the name of Pamela Nolan. I'm not sure if you know her.
Yes.
Who is the one person, past or present, that you would love to capture? I think that's a pretty great question. So thanks, Pam. Who haven't you photographed, and who would you like to?
I think one name comes to mind I'd like to photograph is Johnny Depp.
Oh, that's
I think
a good
that
call.
would be really, that would be something, because if he would let me photograph him, then I think he would really be up for doing something, and being part of the process of taking a great photograph.
If anyone's going to perform for you, he's definitely the man, isn't he? Really?
Yeah. So I think.
What's the reason though? Is there a reason? Is that related to?
I don't, because I do like characters that are on the edge. I think he's on the edge of of madness, maybe, I don't know, but he's a kind of character that's on the edge. I'd like to do a series of people that are on the edge. There's something really, I don't know, that I quite gravitate to, of these people that are on the edge. That would be for a photographic idea.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. I mean, well, maybe you should write to Johnny Depp and make the proposal. Then the shoot might come. The shoot might come to be. You never know.
Yeah. Or he might see this great interview.
He might. Well, let's send him this and tell him to advance to minute 56, and then he'll be ready and waiting for you. He'll be at your beck and call. I can guarantee it. So look, we're drawing close to time, but obviously we've touched.
Unbelievable! We've gone through to an hour already.
I know, it's madness.
You're a great interviewer, Charlie. I've been really enjoying all your interviews with other photographers.
Thanks,
I hope
Richard.
You continue with it for a long time. It's been really great to be interviewed by you.
I certainly plan to. So do come back and listen to them. But you're not going to go anywhere before I've posed you this one question, right? So we've talked around some of your pictures, and we've talked around projects, we've talked around lockdown. And I've been discussing various ways that the industry may change, or photographers might do business differently going forward. I mean, you've touched that you've been doing some shoots, but do you think that anything in particular, or one major thing that will change forever as a result of this whole COVID situation, and especially if you want related to our industry?
It's hard to make a judgment call on what will change forever, because it's such a new experience for us, this time of lockdown and the time of the pandemic, to say that this is going to affect us for a long, long time, the way we work. I don't know. I naively don't want to believe that. I don't want to believe that there is going to be a new normal to taking photos. I think hopefully things will get back to what they were before, and the way that life should be led ultimately for everybody. But in short term, I think you'll find that lots of pictures outside of people rather than indoor portraits. I think that will be a thing, and I think that when there are more than one person in the photograph, that they'll be sort of manipulated back in together to they'd look like they're shot at the same time, and those kind of stuff will start happening. But I don't want to believe that things are going to change to a new normal. I want our old normal back.
Yes, well, I think you're not the first person to make such a statement. I mean, I've seen photographers going out with face masks doing shoots. I've seen photographers talking about just shooting long lenses, keeping a distance. I've been thinking about the kind of the Annie Leibovitz type of composite imagery that you've just referenced as well. But I like that. I like that positive approach, actually, that nothing's going to change and it's all going to be back
Listen,
to normal.
experiences give us change. Will ultimately give us change. I mean, because we change because of our experiences.
We do, yeah.
But um, whether this is going to be, are we all going to have to wear masks for the rest of our lives now and take it? I can't see that happening, and I don't want to believe that would happen. So yes, there will be short-term differences that we're going to have to work with. That's just the nature of what's happening out there. But I think slowly, and hopefully in a few years' time, we'll look back at this time and think how wonderful it is to hug somebody, and how wonderful it is to shake someone's hand, and how wonderful it is to walk in the street and have a drink and put your arm around someone. Those, and feeling so wonderful about those moments that we took for granted.
There you go. That's a beautiful statement. It's having learned to appreciate those particular moments that we haven't had and we cannot do. I went to a business meeting earlier. I couldn't shake hands with the person, and it's a very strange place. So I like that. I think that's a really good positive statement, that we'll look back on this and be thankful for the fact that we can do that again.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
It's been a pleasure having you on. I've really enjoyed talking to you, seeing the pictures, learning about the stories behind them, and moreover, kind of talking generally about photography. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for joining me, and we will speak again soon, I hope.
Thanks.
So thank you, Richard. That was great. Very good conversation. Next week, I will have Carlo Cruz, who is a break dance photographer, should I say, from Los Angeles. Carlo and I work together on a few projects, and he will certainly have some interesting stories to tell. So please do join me then. And as for this week, take care, stay safe, and see you again soon.